Criss by Lynn Ray Perkins. Chapter 17. At the Tasty Freeze on a Tuesday evening. 3 or 4 stars were visible in the opalescent dome of the sky, which was light and diaphanous to the west, a deepening delphinium blue to the east. The air was as warm as bath water. Across the street, strings of light bulbs illuminated rows of shiny used cars and a yellow sign with red letters that read, "Franks can be wieners, Franks can be money, but if it's a car, Frank's Auto Sales will sell you a used honey." Debbie couldn't look at the sign without saying it aloud in her head and trying to make it come out right. She and Patty were eating hot fudge sundaes from plastic boats with plastic spoons. They sat balanced on the back of a bench with their feet on the seat, watching people come and go at the Tasty Freeze. Light, spotty currents of east and westbound traffic shooped past, one way and the other. Frank's featured cream puff of the week was a light blue Mustang convertible, a coupe. It reminded Patty of Nancy Drew, who she hadn't thought about for years. "Did you ever notice," she said, "that everything good or interesting happens to Nancy Drew, and her friends just get the leftovers? If there's a statue or a painting or a look-alike person, it always looks like Nancy. It never looks like Bess or George. And they never mention Beth's without saying that she's pleasantly plump, or George without saying that she's boyish and athletic and has short hair," said Debbie, "just so you don't forget that Nancy is the beautiful one with a perfect figure and the Titian hair. What I want to know is, where does she find time to learn how to do so many things? You never see her practicing. If there's something she doesn't already know how to do, she's good at it right away. It's always harder for Bess and George." "I'd like to read a book about Bess and George solving a crime while Nancy's in the hospital with a broken leg. Or off on a ski weekend with Ned. She's good at skiing. She's really, really good. She could probably be in the Olympics. Maybe she breaks her leg, though. An evil criminal rams her into a tree on the ski slope, and Bess and George solve the mystery without her. Ned could help. Maybe Hannah Gruen could still be in the story. She makes really good food. She could help, too. They could all help. And they would find out that Nancy isn't the only one who can do things." Meanwhile, in her hospital bed, in traction, Nancy is studying marine biology and Norwegian. And brain surgery. "Have you ever noticed how many evil criminals use River Heights for their headquarters?" "I know. It sounds like a scary place. I would be afraid to leave the house." "Maybe you wouldn't be afraid if you had a light blue coupe." A bobbing group of people rose into view. Their heads appeared first as they came up over the rise, then their shoulders and torsos, followed by their guitar cases, legs, and feet. There were 8 or 9 of them, traveling on foot, as a group. Debbie and Patty held their empty plastic boats and watched as the strolling guitarists set their cases down around a picnic table, then lined up at the 2 windows to order. Hector was there. They were both about to call out to him and wave, but something stopped them. Their half-parted lips opened no further, and their half-raised hands fell back to their laps. He was talking to a girl neither of them had seen before. Talking to her from her other side was Dan Persick, Dan the Handsome. The girl was pretty in a way that made Debbie feel the hopelessness of both Hector's cause, because it was clear he was interested in her, and her own, because it was clear that Dan was interested in her too. She was petite and rounded and tan. She had an unruly mass of chestnut hair pulled back in a loose bundle. She had large, dark eyes rimmed with long lashes, and dimples. She even had dimples. She wore, along with cutoffs and a t-shirt, red platform sandals and an ankle bracelet. Debbie looked down at her own footwear, a pair of beat-up sneakers. Also in Hector's subgroup was a second girl who was a little older, 16 or 17. She accompanied them with the friendly, disinterested air of a babysitter. Presently there came the sounds of guitar cases unsnapping and the bonking of guitars being removed, random bumpings of strings blooming from the acoustic wooden shelves, followed by a brief jangly tuning, and Debbie's and Patty's attention was drawn to the other subgroup. Russell Kebsword was in this group, sitting on a picnic table bench with 2 older people. Mr. Schimpf and a lady with white hair and half-moon glasses. Their leader was a young, frizzy-haired minister. You could tell he was a minister because he wore a short-sleeved black shirt with one of those collars. He stood with one foot up on a bench, his guitar hanging from his shoulder by means of a colorful embroidered strap. The four of them began singing Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. The minister sang the chord changes in between the words. His voice was frog-like, yet sonorous. "Have you ever noticed how much seldom is like Austria?" murmured Patty. A car rolled by on the street, the subwoofers of its sound system thumping like a giant heart. "I think the guys in that car were Austrian," said Debbie. "No, really," said Patty, "with the mountains and everything." Hector's subgroup had been delayed in getting their cones by some other customers who wandered in front of them, but now 3 of his group sat at a picnic table near the singers, licking their cones. Hector alone remained at the window, pinning his wallet to the counter with the elbow of his cone-holding hand, while with his other hand he tried to work the change back inside. He'd wanted to treat Meadow, but he hadn't been able to figure out how to do it without also treating Dan Persick and Meadow's cousin Robin. He didn't mind paying for Robin's cone, but he couldn't quite believe he had funded Dan Persick, who was now seated in a favorable position next to Meadow. The whole thing was going wrong, starting with when he invited Meadow to go for ice cream and Pastor Don overheard him. Pastor Don took it for a general invitation and broadcast it to the whole class. Everyone thought it was a great idea. Walking over, Dan Persick had proved himself expert at sidewalk maneuvering, and Hector conceded to himself that maybe football training might have practical applications after all. Now this. He wished Roanne were here to tell him what to do. Debbie and Patty sat for a few minutes more, each with a wadded-up paper napkin held loosely in her hand. Then they stood, tossing the crumpled napkins, the plastic boats, and spoons lightly into the trash basket as they passed. They caught Hector's eye and gave a little wave, and they heard the frizzy minister say they ought to do this every week. Russell Kay saw them toss their napkins so lightly and easily into the basket. They didn't even stop walking to do it. He thought that looked so graceful. He admired it the way you admire a waterfall, or a sunset, or how someone plays a piece of music. He closed his guitar case and reached for the jacket his mother had insisted he bring along, even though it was practically summer. "It's going to be chilly later," she said. He picked it up at the collar by 2 fingers and twirled it around over one shoulder in what he thought might be a similarly graceful move. But he hadn't properly gauged his distance from his classmates, and the twirling jacket knocked Mary's glasses right off her face. She wasn't angry or hurt, but she did cry out in surprise, and then there was the searching for one of the lenses, which had popped out, and no one, or almost no one, noticed the contents of the jacket pocket sailing through the air. A wrapped stick of gum flew straight up and fell uneventfully down. Some loose change arrived at a variety of locations with a variety of semi-musical pings. The cigarette lighter Russell had found somersaulted to the edge of the pavement, while it fell in with a crowd of other lost cigarette lighters and some black plastic combs. And a necklace hurled itself toward the picnic bench where Hector was talking to Meadow, trying to make up for lost time. But it was Dan Persick who saw it land. He reached down and picked it up. He wondered why Russell was carrying around a necklace that said Debbie. Maybe that was his little sister's name. There were a lot of Debbies. There was, for instance, Debbie Pelbury, who had been at the Tasty Freeze a few minutes ago, whose locker was next to his, who had, he was pretty sure, a crush on him. He could make her blush just by looking at her. It was kind of fun. Thinking maybe he could have some fun with this necklace, he put it in his pocket. End of chapter 17.